everyone. Thank you guys so much for coming by today. I know it is not our normal tabletop chatty day, but we do have a special guest here, Jason Hardy from Catalyst Game Labs, here to talk a little about, have some questions about some Shadowrun, 6th edition, and all the fun things that go along with that. So, Jason, welcome to the show. Fantastic to have you here. I know you and I have been talking back and forth, and in his partnership for, I think we said it was going on 3 years or something crazy like that already.
Yeah, that seems quick.
I just looking through emails, it's like, this is unbelievable. So one, thank you so much for the opportunity to be partnered with us. It's been a pleasurable experience for, at least on our side, being able to work with you guys and really, develop that friendship going on between us. So, Jason, if you want to go ahead and sort of just tell us a little bit about yourself, what your role is at Catalyst, how long you've been there, and some cool things you have worked on recently.
Yeah, I'm Jason Hardy. I'm Shadowrun Line developer. I've been with Catalyst Game Labs in that role for almost 13 years now. I freelanced for Catalyst right from the beginning of it, and then freelanced for Shadowrun when it was with FanPro, and then wrote a novel for Shadowrun when it was with WizKids, and pitched a novel for Shadowrun when it was with FASA. So I've been chasing that little skittering mouse across several corporations. And I work with everything Shadowrun that's comes out for Catalyst. So that's the cool stuff I get to work on. If it's got the Shadowrun name on it, I've worked on it somehow. So, we just released the Sixth World Companion, which is exciting. I always like the companion book because it gives us a chance to do new things, different things, try out some other things, and just give players a lot of toys to play with. So real excited to have that out. And then we've been doing some cool things that we're planning for Gen Con. The Matrix book should be there. We have this big art portfolio book you might have seen when we had fans vote on some of their favorite pieces of art from Shadowrun history. So this book will have 40 pieces of art that you can just detach out, put them up on your wall on heavy cardstock. So, including, of course, the original Shadowrun cover art. And lots of other cool pieces. And then there's a calendar. I was approached with this idea to do a Shadowrun calendar, and we turned over how that would work. And it's a 16-month calendar. It's got dates of Origins and Gen Con and Dragon Con reprinted on it, as well as notable dates in Shadowrun history. And then each month has a map and a little adventure to go along with that map. So with each month, you have something you can play on each page.
That is absolutely. When does that? Is that already released? The calendar, or do we know when
No,
that
that
released
should
yet?
be at Gen Con. We should have it at the con, and then it'll hit stores after that.
Oh my goodness, I know absolutely what I'm buying at the convention first thing. But no, that's awesome. 13 years for with that role. That is absolutely some insane time with the company. I know you said it's traded hands through a bunch of different companies as the title goes, which already in and itself seems very, very Shadowrun in nature, with corporations sort of buying up other things. So I think
it's a bio what are the autobiography?
Yeah, true.
The tabletop version.
Exactly, tabletop autobiography. I like it. But that's awesome. I know the three of us have been able to spend some time looking over the companion book from various degrees. But I am extremely, extremely excited for a lot of the new rules variations to come out. Such as, like, I know, which is really funny. Right before the book came out, I mentioned, I had a small conversation about strength to come up with you, Jason. Is like, well, now that I'm really digging in, like, to understand the hello, Mystery Hand in the background. Nice to see you.
I tried to tell Mystery Hand this wasn't the time, and she wouldn't listen.
Hey, that's okay. Mystery Hands are okay. But sort of breaking down the rules of balancing and trying to understand a little bit more for that. When seeing the new strength rules come out in the companions guide, so like strength can now, have a different impact on melee combat or recoil control and stuff like that. It's really cool, like, to see things that strength can now do that I didn't even think it was of a possibility of strength having to use for for recoil control, for instance. But really cool to see. And go ahead and start right off. If we do have a lot of new people in chat, if you guys haven't already, welcome to the channel. We typically play tabletop games on Thursday nights. Currently going through a Starfinder game. But we are going to be going ahead and jumping right back into Shadowrun here in the next couple of months with some Sixth World Edition. So it'll be very, very cool. Make sure you keep your eyes out for that. But overall, unless you guys have any questions for Jason about his history and working at Catalyst, I'll go ahead and jump in with some of the questions I know that we've queued up earlier. Donnie or JJ, do you have any questions before we get started with the questions?
I've always wondered, just becoming, you're kind of like an editor, but getting into the business of being a developer for tabletop games, starting from the beginning with just becoming interested, maybe writing novels like you said you kind of came up. Just how does someone begin to get involved in that way? Is it just writing stories and sending them to blogs until someone notices you, or is there a school for
it? There's not a school. I think there's a lot of different paths in. In the end, the most common denominator is finding some way to be useful to make a game happen. So that can be writing, that can be editing, that can be proofing. It could even be art. It's a little more rare for someone who does the art to transition to the writing side, just because those skills don't always go hand in hand. But if you find some way to be useful to the game, then you learn more about how the process goes, you learn more about what goes into it, and then you get more responsibilities. Like, there is a writer I have right now who, started out with some smaller assignments, showed their writing ability was good, and then got bigger assignments in writing and got more rules. And so now, as I watch how they write rules, I'm liking how their rules develop. And so that leads to more assignments. And then I've also brought him in, and there's been a couple of writers I've done this with, bring them into development so they can develop maybe an ebook or a print book, and they can see what that side is like. And then based on how that goes, if they like it, if they did it well, then that could be a future thing that they can do. So it's just starting with one element and then adding on to it.
Perfect. That's really good. Because, obviously, I'm nowhere near going into that path of, looking to write stories and stuff like that. But, somewhat I am as a game master, but it's really cool to see that path become available, because I was always thinking you have to be going into the game design portion to get into that game design portion. So it's very cool to see alternate paths to be able to really get into that game space if that's a desire you have for it. So that's really cool. I like that.
Well, one of the fun things about developing is you don't want to ever do everything by yourself. You don't want to have all the writing, all the rules, all the layout, all the whatever done by yourself. You want to make it a collaborative effort. So, you need to have a range of skills, but you also need to be able to work with other people who have some of the skills you want and bring it all together, which is really important, rather than making sure you have all the skills yourself.
Definitely makes sense to me. Any other questions before we get started? JJ, I think you're muted.
Sorry,
you're good.
When you guys make something or start something new, and then you kind of put it out there, whether it's abridged or fixed or changed or anything like that, how much of the community response do you guys actually take into consideration, or you just have testers? How does that really work?
Yeah, there's community response that comes in two directions. So usually there's play testing that's done in advance. A lot of times that's done on the writing side, so the writers have their groups that they're playtesting with. I have people I playtest with. And then for some larger projects, we'll send playtest material out to other people just to get as wide a response as possible. But then after the fact, a lot of the people that are working on Shadowrun are playing Shadowrun. Some of them are demo agents for Catalyst. So they're regularly talking to other people who play Shadowrun. They're playing it themselves. Excuse me. They're playing it at conventions. So they hear a lot of the feedback or see what's going on. And that's informs things going forward. We just posted a frequently asked questions document on the website. And the people that assembled that are mostly people who are writing for Shadowrun. Some of them are demo agents. But these are questions that they're hearing as they're writing for and playing Shadowrun. And so they're getting that feedback regularly, and that's informing what they're doing.
So, like, if somebody not in the playtest or at Gen Con or anything has any concerns or questions, is there a place for them to go and, like, submit those, or an email they can send it to?
Yeah, you can always write me, Jason at CatalystGameLabs.com. Write me an email if you want. I'll read it. I won't necessarily agree with it, but I'll read it.
I can definitely understand that one. Well, that's really cool that there's even for like beyond playtesting and stuff like that, there's a very, well, I like open community manager, not community manager, but like individual who is capable of being able to take those requests, look over them, and see like whether or not they actually make sense for the rule set and go into that. So that's very, very cool opportunity that we have. I know a lot of other game designers, they're sort of like, well, this is our child, and you guys just get to enjoy what we create, and hope you guys enjoy it. So it's really cool to see that there's, beyond the play testing of these individuals or the play tester groups, individuals who can reach out, and if they have any concerns or ways they have game rules set up in their head, it's a good way to let out. So.
And there's always going to be more rules, and someday there will be another edition, so it's good to keep hearing ideas. I don't have all the ideas myself, for certain. I need to hear other ideas.
That's
You heard it here. 7th edition confirmed.
Eventually, asterisk.
You could look at my computer. There is no file that has SR7 or 7th edition or anything in it. So no thinking has been done about it yet.
I mean, I am, for at least for me, I've played quite a bit of Shadowrun 5th edition, and I pretty much as soon as 6th edition came out, when I believe it was released at Gen Con before heading stores, it was literally the first thing. As soon as it released, I ran straight to the booth, picked up my copy, and I have thoroughly enjoyed 6th edition quite a bit when it comes to some of the simplifications from 5th edition to 6th edition to get people interested in, because there is a little bit of a learning curve going to Shadowrun for a lot of people who, may have a simpler time, like with D&D 5th edition, trying to transition them over to Shadowrun. They're like, well, what do you mean there's a dodge test and an attack test and all these other things, and there's 3 active worlds that are all happening simultaneously. So it does have a little bit of a learning curve, but I'm glad that 6th edition has found ways to make it more simplified, to be able to be more friendly to the community that are of newer individuals. And I believe that's was a big goal of 6th edition. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jason.
No, absolutely. That's why I'm very happy to hear that. That was definitely the goal.
Perfect. Now, I know that's not necessarily like an exact response of 5th edition's complexity, but 6th edition was really hyped on. We are trying to bring Shadowrun to more players and make it more casual to it, not without going all the way to anarchy versus like rule set. So what they did come with a new edge system compared to the one for 5th edition. And for players that prefer like the crunchier system of 5th edition, that have like hesitated to try 6th edition, do you have any words of wisdom that might be able to bring them to the 6th edition side? Obviously, I know it's like if they prefer the crunch, then they probably will continue to play 5th edition, because 6th edition it just has a lot less crunch to it. But I will say maybe some of the rules in the Companions Guide may have a little bit of crunch for it, like with the a little bit armor changes that go on with the Companions book. What do you have any?
There's the new edge rule where you could replace bonus edge with modifiers. I thought that was kind of a good reach over to 5th edition.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely one thing is the optional rules that in the companion that give you a chance to put the game where you want it to be. If you want to nudge it in one direction or nudge it in another, the core rules are the way I like it to be, but that doesn't mean the way I like it to be should happen at every table. Everyone else can do the way they like it to be, and if we can put together a set of rules that have been tested and are fun without blowing up the game too much, then you have that to make the game what you want. I think the other thing for me is in some ways it has surprised me a little bit about how much variety SR6 still offers. I had some worries early in the development process about, well, how many more weapons or other rules can we add because we're simplifying the system so much? Is it going to be expandable? And it turned out it's really expandable on that attack ratings and different edge functions and the wild die in particular give you a lot of things to do without adding a whole lot more complexity, but you still get options. And I think most importantly to me is decisions still matter. You can think about what you're going to do in a situation, how you're going to try to gain an advantage over the opposition, whether it's your plan to con them or your plan to shoot them or your plan to throw a spell in their face. Whatever your plan is, if you think about it and try to gain a tactical advantage, it's going to pay off as a benefit. And that's what I like a good crunchy system to do. And I think even though SR6 is streamlined, it still does that.
I completely agree. I think that's what's nice about 6th edition is that it allows your players to sort of do what they want, even if it's all at the same table. Like, we've had players that prefer the crunchier side of it, so they may look at, getting a more tactical advantage on one side compared to a face who might still be more rules light and like to make it a little bit flow a little easier and stuff like that. So even though there's variation of crunchiness that can happen at a table with 6th edition, it almost feels like it can have that variation of crunchiness to each player sitting at the same table, which I really, really enjoy as well.
I've got a pretty specific.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've got a pretty specific example of exactly how this crunch can the edge system brings this crunch, because I was preparing for my upcoming character who might be a face, and normally if I was planning ahead to play a face, I might want to wing it in an upcoming encounter. But with the edge system, you have this social edge encounter where you edge based off of if I know more details about the person I'm about to talk to. So maybe as a player, I would prioritize more research before I wing it with the conversation. Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's fine, and I'm glad to bring that up because just referring back to the question earlier about shaping the game through playtesting, the very first iteration of the SR6 rules that went out to playtesters was more combat focused, just because that's the system I worked on first, because that's what I wanted to try to streamline. So I designed the whole attack rating and defense rating and edge system around combat with the intention of filling in other systems later. But when we sent that out to playtest, one really strong and repeated piece of feedback was you need to make sure edge has a place in social situations so that social tests can use this mechanic and it's not just relegated to magic and combat. Make sure the faces have a way to use this. And so that was a really important bit of feedback. So we made sure that we put in clear advantages and clear times you could use edge so that it felt like you had something valuable to do in social tests.
No, I completely agree. And that's what I really enjoy, the social point of it. Like, I'm all for combat and stuff like that. Obviously, we play Shadowrun for that. But I also think, the ability to go and try to talk your way out of a scene or, go to some low-level corporate individual and try to weasel some information out through that way as well with legwork and all that is also just a fantastic thing you can do in this system that some systems may lack in having, specific rule sets that give bonuses or stuff like that for those more charismatic characters beyond just like, oh, you can get, inspire people or something of that nature, but you can actually get some actual moments where you can shine a little bit as a character without having to worry about how much bullets am I shooting down range or am I casting a spell type of thing.
Yeah, and I'll give a special hat tip to Kevin Zarnecki, one of our writers, the guy who wrote Crimson and writes a lot of the stuff in Sourcebook. Very good writer. And I had him over for a session once where I was running my group through some of the plot lines from the book Under Shadows. And it was kind of set up to be a social situation where you're dealing with two different gangs on different floors of this arcology. But he was so good at knowing how to appeal to what each gang wanted and playing them off each other. And he just showed the strength that a social character can have. So that is always something I call on is, remember what a social character can do and how powerful they can be without firing a weapon or swinging a sword.
I completely agree. Any other points for JJ or Donnie before we move on to the next question?
I kind of am curious. I have questions, but I'm kind of curious about the ones we actually wrote down. So,
Okay, we can go ahead and hold them off to the end. That's not a huge issue.
Going off script.
Exactly. Already. First question off script. Now, Jason, with the new companion that just came out, what would you say some of the biggest things that you felt like improved the system of 6th edition overall as a whole? I know we have a lot of new things in this companion book. We have the new Metasapiens that came out with it. We have a bunch of new qualities. We have now 6th edition rules for infected characters, which I was super excited about. But we have a lot of different options here. What are some of the things that you really think improve the system of 6th edition beyond just having that flexibility of the system?
Well, I think the flexibility is important, but one area that I really like to have flexibility in is character creation. For both 5th and 6th edition, in the core book, we went with a priority system for character creation based on speed, and we kept testing it out, and the priority system allows you to build a character quicker, usually, than point buy,
right.
Except there is sometimes a learning curve with figuring out how the priorities work. And so that does make some people like point buy better. And so it's always nice when we can have all the options available. So you can have point buy, you can have sum to 10, you can have life path. And so whatever option to make a character feels comfortable to you, you can use. And since making a character is a really important part of an RPG and makes you feel like it's your thing, I like having those options.
Yeah, I know. Were there life paths in 5th edition, or was that something that was added later on in 5th edition?
There were life paths in Run Faster.
Run Faster? Okay. Because I was looking through, because I thought they looked familiar, but I could not remember for the life of me which book it was in. But I really enjoyed looking through the life paths and seeing like sort of ways to build a character that can help almost guide newer players who have never made a character in Shadowrun before with like looking at priority tables like what is this A, B, C, D, and E, and F, and sort of just like guide through on, oh, do you want to start with like starting a kid or like as an adult or starting where you want to start with this life path. I thought it was a really fantastic addition as well.
Yeah, and I like the fact that if you really are so inclined, you could make a character without thinking mechanically about it at all. You could really think of the story you're telling and then see what stats come out of that and go from there.
I thought it was really familiar to like almost just a generic D20 system where you level up and you have basically every 5 karmas a level up, and the life path really sets out what you get at this level.
Yeah.
I love it.
Speaking of character creation, have you seen those? Obviously, I'm sure you've heard of the online like drop down, like the Chummer third party softwares and stuff like that. Have you guys ever thought about bringing that in house? Not specifically Chummer, but like that idea of software. That way, you guys like kind of like D&D Beyond, where you buy the books and you can do that kind of stuff. Is that a plan or a thought or anything?
I have to speak carefully.
We can drop it. We can move on to something else if you need.
So one of the complications we have to deal with is that we don't own Shadowrun. Shadowrun is owned by Tops, which is owned by Fanatics, which is now Fanatics I think has the game content. The TV content is owned by the former Tops parent. I forget the name of it now. The thing that Michael Eisner owns. So, and we only have the gaming and fiction rights to Shadowrun. So when we do something electronically, it gets a little tricky because the computer game license belongs to Microsoft. So we have to make sure that we don't step on their toes. So that's obstacle number one. And then we have done some licenses for that, for character creation, that had more robust support for a while and then didn't. And trying to work out how we could add more support has been a longer time task than I wanted it to be. Was that vague enough? Did that?
I think it was vague enough just to be what a Johnson would say, honestly.
So we are working on other ways. I first of all, I very much doubt we'd fully bring anything in-house just because we don't have that expertise in-house. We don't have anyone in-house who does that. So we would be looking at finding partners. We're looking at developing a couple of partnerships for online game and character management, and hopefully we'll have information about them in the near future.
Cool. I mean,
I can dig that. I can dig that because I know while it can be one of the more challenging things in Shadowrun, but like for me, it is one of my favorite parts is just sitting down and just creating characters and just sort of seeing different backstories or how like these different perks or different spells work together and stuff like that. But doing it online is so much easier than whipping out 5 different books, 6 different PDFs, and like looking like you're a decker trying to go through and make a decker. But it definitely would be excited for something like that, like you were saying, at least for some information in the near future. Thank you.
Yeah, well, in the past 2 years have shown us that remote gaming, needs to keep growing and happening. So we need to support it.
Yeah.
Because I'm the kind of guy who I love books, but I gotta have an audiobook. I can't, my reading comprehension, I'll read a paragraph, I'll be like, cool, I don't know what I just read.
More of those two.
Yes. But it's cool. Going on to the next point here. I know we talked a lot about designing the rules for Shadowrun and the different systems that you had. And it's not always as streamlined as we would like it to be. But could you go into some of the process of designing some of these rules and exactly what it looks like to design a magic system for Shadowrun or something like that?
Sure. Well, the magic system in particular was a fun one because that was one that I thought about really early in the process of SR6 because it was based on some other thinking I was doing about just kind of modular systems where you can combine different elements to build something more powerful. So the spell creation system that's in Street Weird, where you can take different ingredients and make them into a spell, was how all the magic in the core book was built. So I built that ingredient system first and had a spreadsheet of all the different things, if you have flame or if you have an element, if you have range, and it was a whole long sheet. And so that required a lot of tinkering because you can come up with one list of ingredients and then you design a bunch of spells and then you realize what spells you didn't design. And so you need to change it, or you realize 2 of your ingredients overlap a lot. So there's always that level where you have to keep playing with it and try to get it to work a little smoother than it did on first run through. But it was fun to build that from the ground up. And that's the main reason why spells changed from having changeable force in SR6 is that was really tough to do with the spell design system. And so the spell design system necessitated other changes, but then it let people have the flexibility of being able to make their own spells when the magic book comes out. So there's some trade-offs you have to deal with too.
Sure.
I don't know if that fully answered the question, but I did talk.
I love it. I'm just glad there's talking and not just dead air. That's for strangers staring at each other just makes for weird content. But no, I definitely like that it took some time, that it was really cool to hear that you had this process already created whenever you guys were looking at 6th edition, and now it's just like opening up the curtain for the rest of the world to see. It's like, oh, this is the coolest of things that we had for options for you, and go release it and cause chaos for your GMs everywhere. It's fantastic. And
Cool.
Donnie,
Yeah,
I know
really
you
excited for the magic book to come out just so people could have that in their hands.
Yes, and I know when the Street Weird came out, we were still playing 6th edition quite heavily, and Donnie was actually a shaman that was more focused on the like healing side as well as summoning spirit side. So really looking at the spirit relation that I believe that was also brought out in that book more in depth than what the core rule book brought. Donnie, you want to talk about how sort of like Street Weird felt for you coming out compared to the core rulebook version of the Magic as well, and sort of what perks you saw for it?
Yeah. Well, I love channeling. That was the meta magic that my shaman had. But just being able to have more control over spirits, free spirits are always exciting. Greater spirits. I just love the whole astral plane, the spirits of Shadowrun. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, the rest of the magic was great as well. A lot of flavor in the individual spells I thought was interesting compared to they had more utility than spells in the core rulebook, I would say, that were probably the foundation of spells.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a fun part of that book, is not only looking to get the spell creation system out, but looking how to expand it. So we had a base of spells, but now how do we get more variety in what else needs to be added? And that was an experiment. And that involved letting other people play with the system I designed, which is always a little frightening, because it's like, no, it's my toy. You don't.
Just don't break it,
please. You might have good ideas, so go ahead and take it. And they did. The writers had good ideas.
Good.
And of course, with spell creation, even to this day, we're not playing Shadowrun yet. We're in between those campaigns, but every day I'm still thinking of like, oh, that'd be a cool spell. I could make that in Shadowrun.
And I know a big thing that also came into our campaign when Street Weird came out was blood magic. We actually had 6th edition rules for blood magic. For Adept as well as Magician, which was really, really cool to see sort of that come back. Because I know, like, when I came into 6th edition, I was like, well, I know there's a lot of, we're a brand new system, but there's so much stuff I can do character creation-wise and lore-wise. I almost feel like they got put back a little bit on the back burner for 5th edition going into 6th. It's like, because obviously you have to wait for these rules to be fully fleshed out before you can go ahead and get them into the more creative stuff like this. But seeing blood magic make a resurgence back, because I know my personal favorite bad guy to use is Ass Technology, trying to with their crazy blood magic. It's a very easy go-to for bad guys. And I was like, well, how do I implement this into 6th edition without thinking of like crazy homebrew or trying to figure out outside rules for bringing 5th edition into 6th without also having to use the conversion tool that was given as well. So seeing that come out sort of like right at the peak moment when we were starting to dabble into that quest line or that mission line with Ass Technology was icing on the cake. I couldn't have planned it better myself.
It's in the middle of 30 Days of Night.
Yeah, it was beautiful. We sort of transitioned from 30 Nights into this sort of Aztec background that was sort of because it was one of the little mission threads you could do, but we were more of that path with like the blood magic and stuff, which was very, very cool to see as that was released in the book. And I know my players jumped all over that and was like seeing some of the spells that were going around with the blood magic was also just terrifying in general.
Good. That's how blood magic should be.
That's what I'm saying. There's a reason they're on most wanted lists all over the place.
You seem to put us on those pretty much every time we play.
Well, you guys also decide to make crazy things happen, like shoot RPGs at HRT.
I could have swore the RPG would have done more damage.
Should have edged. But yeah, so it's really cool to see that. Speaking of lore that sort of transitions from edition to edition, is there someone who's like an archivist at Catalyst that sort of keeps track on the overarching meta plot for it? Or is that something that the writers sort of come together and brainstorm about and it sort of just flows as people come and go from Catalyst, or is it a little bit of both?
Little bit of both. I mean, I have to admit there was some disappointment when I got hired because I was waiting for someone to give me the secret file of Shadowrun knowledge, all the things that they've hinted at. Like, what really was going on with Tempo? I want to know what was going on with that drug. You'll give me that file, right? I didn't get a file. Still waiting for it. So a lot of it is the collected knowledge of the writers, and the developers have their own ideas and bring them up. But it's a collaborative effort. There are definitely some writers who are tremendous lore repositories and have so much knowledge, and we have freelancer forums, or we have Basecamp that we use for projects, or just a freelancer Google group, and they can dump a lot of good knowledge and are very useful for that. But a lot of it is also continually PDF searching through your books to remind yourself what something should be and try to bring it in line, because there's a lot and it's tough to keep track of it all.
Yeah, because I was going through and sort of looking through at different PDFs and sort of like putting them in order of like chronological for the meta plot wise. And I was looking through, I think it was Cutting Black, and I didn't even realize like half the stuff that happened with Detroit happened. I was just like, what do you mean? Like 30 years ago, Bug Spears came back and we're like, okay, round 2, let's do this. And it just felt like completely blew over my head because there's like so much going on in the world right now. UCAS is sort of splitting apart, as well as everything that's going on with Seattle in general. And then you're like, oh wait, in this different part of the whole, of UCAS, Bug Spears are happening, but over here in Denver, something else is happening. So there's so many. That's what I love about the lore and Shadowrun in general. There's so many plot lines you can follow, depending on where you want to tailor your story to, that it can sort of drive you mad on trying to follow them all in a dateline.
Yeah, but it's fun, and Cutting Black is fun because it had the advantage of a really long lead time.
Mm-hmm.
The main writer and developer of that particular book, R.J. Thomas, first brought me that idea when it was, I want to write some stuff about Detroit and make Detroit into Motor City and make it a runner haven. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. Can we do something more? How does it get to be that? And then he thought about it, came back with a little bigger idea. I was like, all right, but can we make it bigger? And so it kept getting bigger and bigger. And then by the time it was getting big enough, we needed a plot book to launch 6th edition. And so we added one more big element to it. And I said, okay, so we're going to finally do this book that we've been talking about for years at this point. And you can develop it, and it'll have all the big things that we've been building into it. And also it's going to have plot lines that are going to play out for years after that.
Right.
So have fun. And because we had so many discussions and he worked so hard in thinking about it, it's got a lot of lore built into it that connects to the past and then has a lot of tendrils extending to the future.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I know, especially when the 6th edition books were first starting to come out, they were being dual written for 5th edition and 6th edition. Is that something you guys are planning on continuing to do for the foreseeable future, or are we going to be eventually getting to a point where you guys are going to be focused primarily on 6th edition content, it continuing that line that way?
So I'll tell you my guilty secret. The only things that are dual statted for 5th and 6th editions are things that originally were written for 5th and I didn't get around to releasing until 6th came out. And he might be like, hey, didn't a mission just come out?
Yeah.
This month that's dual statted? Does that mean it was written years ago? Maybe. I'm a little slow on some things. But yeah, so like Crime Catalog and the missions, those all had 5th edition stats. 6th edition is the edition now, but I don't feel like throwing out work just because it's a different edition.
For sure.
It still could be useful, so we'll go ahead and keep the stats so anyone who's playing 5th or 6th can use them. But it's not because I'm making sure we do 2 sets of stats. It's because I'm slow and I'm making sure we add 6th edition stats so that they're applicable to the current edition.
No, I
actually
go ahead.
It's actually kind of brilliant to do that, especially in the beginning of a new edition release, and you're drawing in players from the 5th edition, and they're making an investment into 5th edition, but now this investment also counts for 6th edition, so it eases them into that transition if they want to pursue newer editions without having to double down the cost.
Yeah, so it is kind of a happy accident, and if my layout person will let me get away with it, I'll think about doing it in the future, but he is on the verge of punching me in the face for having to lay out 2 sets of stats in every mission.
I can only imagine.
He's delighted every time.
He's like, Jason, we talked about this. Come on now.
How many more are going to be like this? Just a few more. It's okay.
It's fine. It's just it's going to be good.
What ideas you got back
there? And then I know a big question that was brought up, and I also am very interested into it. But do modern events ever motivate the world of Shadowrun, or the lore you guys create for it? I know sometimes my players and I have a session like, I feel like this is happening right now in the real world. And sometimes it's a little scary to see how close the real world is to Shadowrun. But how often would you say that like modern events really motivate either lore points or just the world of Shadowrun in general?
I mean, it's pretty frequent, just because you can't help it. You're living in the world you're living in, and what you're writing is a product of your brain, and those two are going to relate. I try not to make it too direct, just because that feels too easy.
Sure.
So if there's an event going on, I want to try to push it to, well, what's a shared concern or fear or issue behind that event, and then carry it into the 6th world. But that can't help but happen all the time. And then sometimes, yeah, you do it on purpose, because that's what Cyberpunk was all the time anyway. Cyberpunk was always a dark mirror to reality. So that's what we're doing.
That is, we are living indeed in the darkest timeline, confirmed by Jason. I guess I'll open up, because I know those are like the real big questions that we had going into 6th edition and the Companions book. JJ and Donnie, do you guys have any further questions as far as Companions book, 6th edition, any of the books that are going into it, anything of that nature?
Well, I actually thought of a question earlier. We were talking about like spells and how we were making them. And not even just about spells, but like any of the rules or any sort of like combination of tricks and cool things you added. Was there ever like you guys created something and then like either a playtester or like one of your employees or whatever was like, hey, so we made this rule and this rule, but if we combine these 2 things, it's literally the ultimate power. So like, what was the most like interesting, like, I never noticed that. That is crazy. Like, is there a time that sticks out to where you're like, oh,
I mean, there've been a number of times where either I've read a rule and immediately said no, 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 don't do that, or reviewers, so playtesters or proofers come back and say, yeah, this rule will make this character so mighty that I will never allow them at my table, so maybe change that. I'm trying to think of a specific change when that happened. I mean, it's definitely happened a number of times, but I can't remember what they were. Usually it's about how many actions someone could pile up. Because that's always the tempting thing to do, is give people more minor actions or up the cap of minor actions, or even more dangerously, lower how many minor actions it takes to exchange for a major. And that's always, from in both 5th and 6th edition, that was something I've tried to move away from, of the, the street samurai moving 4 or 5 times to the regular person's 1. And so anytime you start to creep back toward that, red lights flash and say, nope, 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 don't let people dominate the actions quite that much.
Right, and I know, like, that was one of the biggest things that I seen difference from 5th edition to 6th edition was the initiative rule set. And, like, oh, my Street Sam who has, like, 45 initiative doesn't get to go 5 times compared to the mage who's like, oh, I'm going to summon for 1, and then maybe cast a spell for 2, and then it's going to be literally just a Street Sam going around and cutting through people. So I'm glad I have this spirit that sort of just follow me around now. It's sort of interesting to see everyone play on a even playing field, even though there's different with majors and minors now. But definitely see it a lot more leveled as it is compared to 5th edition.
Yeah, and I want speed to have an advantage, but not the same really huge advantage. Because I played enough, and I love 4th edition, but I played enough 4th edition where I was sitting at the table going, why don't I have a reflex enhancer? Why am I just sitting here while everyone else is doing stuff?
Yeah. It definitely felt like 5th edition, and even, like, from what I've read of 4th edition, really, if you didn't have any sort of cyberware that was like reflex enhancing or reaction enhancing, it was felt like very, very bogged down and slow. Like, you could actually feel the enhancers being like, well, I should probably take a little bit of dip in some Nuyen and put some of those in and hope I can be okay with some of the essence I'm going to lose for it. But it definitely seems worth it in combat.
Yeah, either you had to get some cyber or BioWare yourself, or you needed to have a mage who liked you, who would cast spells on you. Or be that mage.
Or be that mage, and then you always have it. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
You gotta sustain the magic.
Exactly. You have foci for that now. Don't even worry about it. And I will say, we had a rather large group. I guess it was 6 people, and we have two mages that both took increased attribute, and watching that stack between 2 different attributes being stacked by 2 different mages and sustained, it was something special to say the least. It was like, oh, my drain pool is like, to resist drain is like 17 or 18. I was like, okay, cool, so you're just never taking drain because it's just already high in anyway. But that was one thing I was not ready for, was having 2 mages at the table.
That's a lot of power.
Not to mention the combinations we'd have with their different spells. Like that time we cannoned a body like a mile out into the ocean because we stacked different spells.
And then had spirits do the same of that.
Yeah, I don't remember what spells we stacked. Levitate.
It was something like we like levitated a body because we had to hide the body. So we were like, all right, there's an ocean out there. Let's just levitate this. And someone's like, he stacked his spells or forced it up or something. I'm not a mage guy. But
and the spirit used movement.
Spirit movement, and then it's stacked on top of like invisibility. It was also levitated, so we could fly out. It was some insane magical stuff. I was like, this is what hundreds of hours of Shadowrun have taught you, is how to stack spells and send off a body off into the distance where no one would find it eventually.
So we had like one of our strength guys where it was like it had movement, so as soon as it started moving, it was going to move like
so they
that direction super fast. So it was like they just gone.
Exactly. Anything else? We have a little bit of time left here. Is there any last dire questions that you guys have for Jason? Or Jason, if you have any questions for us, I know it's a question Q&A with you, but doesn't mean you can't also ask Q&As.
What else do you want to see that hasn't come out yet for Shadowrun?
I wasn't ready for this, guys.
I look at the gun system and like the character system as like my own version of Barbies. Like,
just mix and match.
I love the accessories and adding onto it and stuff. Like, I remember even when like older, like 5th edition, I would be putting stuff on there where Josh was like, "What's the point of that?" I'm like, because in my brain it looks cooler. All right, just stop. All right,
gives me no stats, but it looks cooler. Okay.
Yeah. Firing Squad was great for a lot of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You guys, you pretty much have done it. I'm reiterating how much I love that stuff.
All right. More combat gun options, more add-ons, you bet. Can do
what about enchanting?
More detailed enchanting rules?
Yeah. Right now, I feel like enchanting is a big time investment as a character. You got to really prepare. But what if I had a weapon and I wanted it to be a fire sword? You can't enchant that like on the spot. So that's what I want. I want a fire sword.
You want a fire sword. All right. I like someone who knows what they want.
I cannot believe this is what you guys are coming
There's
up
elemental weapon, I guess,
Yeah.
if you're a physical adept.
Yeah, which is sort of close.
But in this fantasy, I'm an enchanting bitch, so.
That's fair. I don't really know. I think the thing I love the most as being the GM is not necessarily like the shiny toys that the players get to play with, but I really am a huge fan for like plot hooks and stuff like that. So anytime there's a new splat book or a new plot book that comes out, I'm the first to go over that and read it. I know there was a older book. It was like a encyclopedia that had like everything that was going on for like the last like 10 or 20 years. I can't remember the name of the book exactly. But I think something like that would be super helpful. It's just like a list of like a timeline of like last 30 years and really big major events in this city or this city. So that way, if I want to go ahead and like pull up the city of Denver, I can go to Denver in the book and it shows me like like here's a setting of what the city looks like now and big plot points that could be used for like more of like a GM cheat sheet. For those.
So kind of Sixth World Almanac, but city focused instead of nation focused.
Exactly. Something that's a little bit more in depth for like me. I don't mind taking the time and going through 80 PDFs and get the exact point that I'm wanting. But maybe for a new GM that's coming in that doesn't have the time to spend into that, they can go ahead, pull out this almanac, look at the city like, okay, well, I want to run in Denver because I'm from Denver. So what things are going on that I can wrap my people in and get them interested at a table and have some buy-in that way for it. That's my thing. I know that's a very big wish, but
it's interesting. I'm gonna have to think about that more. That's an interesting way of doing a geographic book. I will ponder that one. It's a good idea.
Yes, we need it. We have Magic Sword, Gun Rack, and new book. Welcome to Shadowrun.
Chat brought up a Ghostbuster mundane thing.
I think it sounds really cool.
Pretty smart. He's basically like every mundane wants those Ghostbuster traps to suck spirits up into or something similar to that. I was like, that's kind of cool. Because I always felt that way back in the past where I was like, I am mundane. There's a spirit. Everyone else who isn't me, please handle that.
Some of that you get, not in detail, but people are certainly working on that in the third parallel, and that will have ramifications in another campaign book that I'm outlining right now.
Ooh.
See, look, this is me outlining it.
Oh my goodness! Look at that, chat. You heard it here first. Possible Ghostbusters.
Someone
That's
is
called
going to screengrab that.
WhisperNet? Is that what is that called?
Net. Yeah.
I am already. My body is ready. But Jason, thank you so much for taking the time and coming hanging out with us. I know it was sort of spur of the moment. It's like, hey, you want to hop on for an interview? You're like, yes, let's do it. I was like, that was easier than I was expecting. Great, let's set something up. But I do appreciate you working with us for like I said, the last 3 years. is there anything you want to go ahead and shout out, whether it be Shadowrun or Battle? Excuse me. I can't remember. What's the other big IP?
Battletech?
Battletech. Thank you.
No one cares.
Oh, you heard it here first. But anything you guys would you like to go ahead and either talk about a little bit or just sort of go into before we sign out?
I think I've talked about the main things. Just thanks to anyone who plays Shadowrun, including you guys. I'm here to try to help you have fun, and I love to hear the stories of people having a good time at the table. So I appreciate everyone who's playing and talking about it, and keep doing it.
Absolutely. Thank you again for coming and hanging out onto our show. Chat, thank you guys for coming and hanging out. Really do appreciate it. We will be having, I know a lot of you here for the Shadowrun portion, we will be starting up a new Shadowrun story relatively soon in August. So make sure you guys come and hang out with that. It's going to be a fantastic time. We have a lot of really cool character discussion already happening for it and going into it. So make sure you guys are around for it. And we'll see you guys tomorrow with some more tabletop shenanigans. So I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one.